Beloved, the greatest tragedy in the church is not a lack of power. It is unfamiliarity. So many know about the Holy Spirit, yet so few truly know Him. And there is a difference, a holy, eternal difference. And the Holy Spirit is not an influence. He is not a feeling. He is not an atmosphere that comes and goes. He is a person, gentle, sensitive, holy beyond our understanding. And He desires fellowship with you more than you desire answers from Him. And you do not build a relationship with the Holy Spirit the way you build a ministry, or a platform, or a reputation. You build it the way you build intimacy, with reverence, with surrender, and with love. And the first step is recognition. You must acknowledge His presence. Not just in church, not just in prayer meetings, but in the quiet places of your life. When you wake in the morning, He is there. When you sit alone with your thoughts, He is there. When tears fall without words, He is there. He does not force Himself upon you. He waits, oh, how patiently He waits, for you to notice Him. And the Holy Spirit speaks softly. He will never shout over your will. He will never compete with your distractions. If your life is too loud, you will miss Him. That is why learning to be still is sacred. Stillness is not empty. It is full of awareness. In stillness, you begin to sense His nearness, His direction, His correction, His comfort. And the second step is obedience. Relationship with the Holy Spirit cannot grow where disobedience is excused. Every time He whispers and you obey, trust deepens. Every time He warns and you listen, intimacy increases. But every time He speaks and you delay, the heart grows dull, not because He leaves, but because sensitivity fades. And obedience is not legalism. It is love. When you love someone, you care about what grieves them. And the Holy Spirit can be grieved, not by your weakness, but by your resistance. He is gentle, He is holy, and He will not stay where He is constantly ignored. And the third step is surrender. You cannot control the Holy Spirit. You cannot schedule Him. You cannot use Him. He is Lord, and He only fills what is yielded. As long as you cling to your plans, your opinions, your rights, your need to understand everything, there will always be a distance. But when you say, I belong to you, lead me, correct me, change me, something sacred happens. He begins to shape your desires. He softens your spirit. He removes what does not please God, not harshly, not suddenly, but lovingly, faithfully, deeply. And the Holy Spirit is attracted to purity, not perfection, purity of heart. A heart that says, search me, wash me, keep me clean. And the more you walk with Him, the more aware you become, not of others' sins, but of your own need for grace. And finally, relationship grows through dependence. Stop trying to live the Christian life in your own strength. It was never meant to be lived that way. Every victory, every breakthrough, every transformation comes through Him. When you learn to lean on Him, to ask Him before you speak, to consult Him before you decide, to trust Him when you don't understand, you will discover something glorious, and you will discover that He is faithful, and He will teach you when no one else can. He will comfort you when no one else understands. He will guide you when the path is unclear. He will empower you when you are weak, and most of all, He will draw you closer to the heart of God. Many people speak of the Holy Spirit as though He were a distant power, something to be summoned when needed and set aside when life feels manageable. But He is not an influence drifting through the atmosphere, and He is not a feeling that rises and falls with emotion. He is present, living, aware, and deeply personal. And until this truth moves from the mind into the heart, true relationship will never begin. To recognize Him is to become conscious of His nearness, to understand that He is not arriving when music starts or when prayers grow louder, but that He has already been there long before a word was spoken, waiting quietly, respectfully, never forcing His presence upon the soul. And when you recognize the Holy Spirit as a person, everything changes. Because a person can be honored or ignored, welcomed or resisted, loved or wounded, and recognition brings responsibility. Awareness awakens reverence. You begin to understand that your words matter, your attitudes matter, and the atmosphere of your heart matters, because He is there, observing, guiding, gently impressing truth upon your spirit. He does not overwhelm, He does not rush, He does not compete with noise, and many miss Him not because He is absent, but because life is filled with too many other voices. And recognition is not emotional excitement, it is holy awareness. It is waking in the morning with the understanding that you are not alone. It is moving through ordinary moments with the quiet knowledge that heaven walks beside you. When this awareness settles into the soul, prayer changes. You no longer speak into emptiness, and worship is no longer performance, because you are responding to presence, not practicing ritual. The heart becomes tender, careful, and attentive, because love grows when attention is given. And the Holy Spirit is sensitive beyond human understanding. He notices tones, motives, inner resistance, and unspoken pride. Recognition teaches the heart to pause before speaking, to listen before reacting, to wait before deciding. Many ask why guidance feels unclear, yet clarity often begins with acknowledgement. When you consciously recognize Him, you begin to sense gentle restraint. Air danger lies, quiet urging where obedience is required, and deep peace where surrender has already taken place. And to recognize Him also means to accept that He is holy. His nearness is not casual, and familiarity must never replace reverence. The soul that truly recognizes Him does not become careless, but careful, not fearful, but deeply respectful. You begin to understand that holiness is not distance from God, but closeness that requires purity of heart. Awareness of His presence gently exposes what does not belong, not to condemn, but to cleanse. And many long for power, yet recognition always comes before empowerment. Until the Holy Spirit is known as present, He will remain misunderstood. Until He is welcomed as a person, relationship will stay shallow. Recognition is the doorway to communion, and communion transforms the inner life, shaping thoughts, softening desires, aligning the heart with heaven, producing a quiet, steady awareness that you are walking with God, not alone, not forgotten, but accompanied, guided, and gently held in divine presence. Sensitivity to the Holy Spirit is not something that happens suddenly, and it is not granted through excitement or noise. It is cultivated slowly in the quiet places where the soul learns to listen rather than speak. His voice is gentle, often softer than thought, and those who live hurried lives rarely recognize it. To hear Him, you must become still, not only outwardly, but inwardly, allowing the heart to settle under. Ill distractions lose their power and awareness sharpens. Stillness is not inactivity, it is attentiveness, a holy posture that says you are willing to pause long enough to notice what heaven is saying. And the Holy Spirit does not force communication, and He will not raise His voice to compete with restlessness. When the mind is crowded and the heart is divided, sensitivity fades, not because He withdraws, but because the inner ear becomes dull. Quietness clears the atmosphere of the soul, making room for discernment, and in that sacred silence impressions begin to form, not loud, not dramatic, but clear and weighty. Many mistake emotional intensity for spiritual clarity, yet the Spirit often speaks through calm assurance rather than overwhelming sensation, and learning to be still requires discipline, because everything within the natural mind resists silence. Thoughts rush in, worries surface, and impatience demands movement, but persistence in stillness trains the heart to rest. Over time, the noise lessens and the spirit becomes alert. Sensitivity grows as you learn the difference between your own thoughts and His gentle leading, a distinction that becomes clearer with practice and obedience. And stillness also reveals what is hidden. In quiet moments, attitudes, motives, and fears rise to the surface, and sensitivity deepens as these are surrendered. The Holy Spirit often uses silence to bring conviction, not through harsh accusation, but through quiet truth that cannot be ignored. When the heart remains open, correction is received with humility, and discernment increases, allowing you to recognize His promptings more readily in daily life. And those who cultivate stillness begin to sense when to speak and when to remain silent, when to move forward and when to wait. Guidance becomes less confusing, not because life becomes simpler, but because the heart has learned to listen. Sensitivity sharpens through consistency, not intensity, and regular moments of quiet create familiarity with His presence. The more time spent listening, the easier it becomes to recognize His voice, even in crowded environments. And stillness is where trust develops. When you stop striving and allow the Holy Spirit to lead without interruption, dependence replaces self-effort. You become aware that direction does not always come as instructions, but as peace, restraint, or gentle urgency. Sensitivity is refined through attention, and attention is born in silence. The heart that learns to be still discovers that God was never distant, only waiting for a listening spirit, ready to guide, comfort, correct, and reveal truth in ways that transform the inner life and shape every decision made in His quiet presence. Intimacy with the Holy Spirit grows or diminishes at the point of obedience, because relationship is proven not by intention but by response. Many desire closeness while resisting instruction. Yet true fellowship is formed when the heart answers promptly to high, gentle direction. He speaks in subtle impressions, quiet convictions, and inner restraints, and each time these are honored, trust deepens and awareness sharpens. Obedience is not about perfection, but about willingness, a posture that says His leading matters more than personal comfort or convenience, and delayed obedience slowly dulls sensitivity. When the Holy Spirit prompts and the heart hesitates, rationalizes, or postpones response, the inner ear becomes less attentive, not because He withdraws, but because resistance creates distance. Immediate obedience, even in small matters, keeps the spirit tender. A simple act of forgiveness, a word left unspoken, a decision to walk away from what troubles the conscience may seem insignificant. Yet these moments shape the depth of intimacy that follows. And obedience is an act of love, not fear. It grows from trust in His character rather than pressure to perform. When you know He leads with wisdom and compassion, surrender becomes natural. The Holy Spirit never demands obedience to control, but invites it to protect, to guide, and to align the heart with divine purpose. Each yes strengthens confidence in His voice, making future direction clearer and more familiar. And intimacy flourishes when obedience becomes immediate rather than negotiated. The heart that obeys quickly remains open, free from inner conflict. There is peace in alignment, a quiet assurance that comes when resistance is laid aside. Even when obedience costs company, effort, or challenges understanding, the resulting closeness outweighs the sacrifice. In yielding, the soul learns that His ways produce life, clarity, and rest, and small obediences prepare the heart for greater trust. The Holy Spirit often tests faithfulness in simple matters before entrusting deeper guidance. When obedience is practiced daily, intimacy becomes steady rather than seasonal. The relationship is no longer driven by emotion, but by consistency. The heart begins to recognize His promptings more clearly, and confusion diminishes as responsiveness increases, and disobedience, even subtle, disrupts intimacy. Justifications may quiet the conscience temporarily, but unease remains. The Holy Spirit continues to speak, yet the warmth of closeness is affected. Restoration begins the moment obedience is chosen again. He does not hold past resistance against the willing heart, but responds immediately to surrender, restoring sensitivity and peace. And through obedience, the Holy Spirit shapes character. Desires change, attitudes soften, and pride gives way to humility. Intimacy deepens not through dramatic moments, but through faithful response. The heart that obeys learns to walk in step with His leading, trusting His wisdom over personal understanding, and discovering that closeness with Him is preserved through continual willingness to listen and respond without delay. A surrendered life is the atmosphere in which the Holy Spirit is free to lead without resistance, because He does not force direction upon a heart that insists on control. Surrender is not weakness, it is trust laid down. A quiet yielding that acknowledges His wisdom above personal understanding. As long as the will remains guarded and the future tightly held, intimacy remains limited. The Holy Spirit fills what is yielded, and He guides where permission has been given, and true surrender begins inwardly, long before it shows outwardly. It is the decision to release personal agendas, expectations, and the need to always be right. Many desire divine direction while clinging to predetermined outcomes, yet guidance flows most clearly when the heart is willing to follow without knowing where the path will lead. Surrender removes negotiation from the relationship, allowing obedience to become natural rather than forced, and the Holy Spirit responds to openness. When the soul says, "Lead me as you choose, correct me where you see fit, change me where I resist," His work becomes deeper and more personal. He does not overwhelm, but He does transform. Surrender allows Him access to areas long protected by fear, pride, or self-reliance. In yielding, the heart learns that his leadership is gentle and his intentions are always rooted in love. And control often disguises itself as wisdom. Many rely on experience, logic, and planning, believing these will keep life secure, yet surrender invites divine perspective that reaches beyond human limitation. The Holy Spirit sees what the mind cannot perceive, and his guidance often contradicts natural reasoning. Yielding to his direction requires humility, a willingness to trust unseen outcomes over visible assurance, and a surrendered life remains teachable. Correction is received without offense, and conviction is welcomed rather than resisted. The Holy Spirit uses surrender to refine character, shaping responses, motives, and desires. As resistance fades, peace increases. There is rest in letting go, freedom in no longer striving to manage every detail. Surrender does not remove responsibility, but it replaces anxiety with trust. And daily surrender is essential. Yielding once is not enough, because self-will resurfaces subtly. Each day presents opportunities to choose dependence over independence, guidance over impulse. The Holy Spirit honors continual surrender, responding with clarity, strength, and inner stability. When the heart yields repeatedly, trust deepens and confidence in his leadership grows. And through surrender, the Holy Spirit aligns the soul with divine purpose. Ambitions change, priorities shift, and desires become purified. What once felt essential loses its grip, and what truly matters becomes clear. Yielded hearts move with greater ease because resistance no longer slows obedience. The relationship becomes fluid, marked by cooperation rather than struggle, and a surrendered life creates room for divine order. The Holy Spirit arranges circumstances, opens paths, and closes doors without force. A heart that yields learns to recognize his guidance through peace rather than pressure. Surrender invites his fullness, allowing him to lead completely, shaping every step with wisdom that flows from trust rather than control. Holiness is not an outward performance or a list of disciplines observed for appearance. It is an inward condition of the heart that honors the presence of the Holy Spirit. Purity is not about flawlessness, but about singleness of desire, a heart that longs to please God more than it seeks approval or comfort. The Holy Spirit is drawn to reverence, and where he is honored, his presence rests with peace and clarity. When the heart values what is holy, sensitivity remains sharp and fellowship deepens, and purity of heart begins with intention. It is the quiet decision to guard thoughts, motives, and attitudes, understanding that nothing within is hidden from him. The Holy Spirit gently reveals what does not align with truth, not to shame, but to cleanse. Conviction is one of his greatest expressions of love because it protects intimacy. When conviction is welcomed, purity grows naturally and the soul remains open and responsive. And holiness requires vigilance. What is entertained eventually shapes desire, and what shapes desire influences direction. The Holy Spirit often warns long before actions take place, drawing attention to subtle compromises that weaken spiritual perception. When these warnings are ignored, clarity diminishes. When they are honored, discernment strengthens. Guarding the heart preserves awareness of his presence and maintains spiritual sensitivity. And purity also involves humility. The heart that acknowledges its need for grace remains teachable. Pride resists correction, but humility receives it. The Holy Spirit works freely in hearts that are honest about weakness and willing to be changed. Holiness is not achieved through self-effort, but through cooperation with his refining work. As surrender increases, transformation follows gently and steadily, and the presence of the Holy Spirit exposes inconsistencies. Words and actions come into alignment, and integrity becomes natural rather than forced. Purity affects relationships, responses, and private thoughts. When the heart is guarded, peace becomes constant. The soul is no longer divided, and inner conflict lessens. Clarity replaces confusion because the conscience remains clean and responsive. And holiness does not isolate, it sanctifies. The Holy Spirit does not withdraw you from life, but teaches you how to walk through it without compromise. He strengthens restraint, sharpens discernment, and deepens compassion. A pure heart does not become rigid, but tender. It responds with grace while remaining firm in conviction. And guarding holiness requires continual attention. Each day presents choices that either strengthen purity or weaken it. The Holy Spirit remains faithful to guide, warning when boundaries are approached and restoring when repentant. He is chosen. He does not abandon the willing heart, but responds quickly to humility. And purity creates space for his presence to remain undisturbed. Where the heart is clean, his voice is clear. Where reverence is maintained, Guidance flows freely. Holiness protects intimacy, allowing the relationship with the Holy Spirit to grow without hindrance, deepening awareness, strengthening trust, and sustaining communion rooted in honor and devotion. Dependence on the Holy Spirit is the quiet recognition that the Christian life cannot be lived through human strength, discipline, or determination alone. Many attempt to walk faithfully while relying on personal ability, only turning to divine help when exhaustion sets in. Yet true spiritual life begins where self-effort ends. Dependence is not passivity, it is alignment, an understanding that every step, every victory, and every transformation flows from His enabling power rather than personal resolve. And when dependence replaces self-reliance, pressure lifts. The soul no longer carries the weight of trying to produce spiritual fruit through effort. The Holy Spirit supplies what the heart cannot manufacture: patience when emotions are strained, wisdom when decisions feel unclear, strength when endurance fades. As reliance deepens, trust grows, and the relationship becomes marked by cooperation rather than striving, and daily dependence reshapes prayer. Requests shift from self-directed plans to humble invitation. Guidance is soft before action, and direction is valued more than speed. The Holy Spirit responds to reliance by offering clarity through peace, restraint, or inner assurance. Learning to depend means learning to wait, recognizing that timing matters as much as direction. And dependence also exposes pride. The desire to control outcomes and manage appearances resists surrender. The Holy Spirit gently reveals areas where independence has replaced trust. As these are yielded, rest enters the heart. The need to prove diminishes, and contentment grows. Dependence teaches the soul to receive rather than strive, to listen rather than rush. And strength drawn from the Holy Spirit is consistent rather than fluctuating. Emotional energy rises and falls, but divine empowerment remains steady. When reliance is placed in Him, endurance increases and weariness loses its grip. The heart learns that resilience is not produced by determination, but by continual connection to His presence, and dependence affects decision-making. Choices are no longer driven by urgency or fear, but by discernment. The Holy Spirit guides through inward peace that surpasses reasoning. When uncertainty arises, dependence waits rather than forces movement. This trust prevents unnecessary struggle and aligns actions with divine order. And reliance on the Holy Spirit fosters humility. Achievements no longer inflate the ego because the source of strength is recognized. Gratitude replaces self-congratulation, and reverence deepens. The heart remains aware that apart from Him, progress fades quickly. Dependence keeps perspective clear and pride restrained. And as dependence becomes habitual, the relationship deepens. The Holy Spirit is consulted in ordinary moments, not just crises. Daily life becomes infused with awareness of His guidance. Confidence grows, not in self, but in His faithfulness. Dependence transforms uncertainty into peace, weakness into strength, and effort into rest, creating a steady walk marked by trust, obedience, and continual reliance on divine presence.